Okay. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name's Gwydion. I'm going to be doing a presentation today on Magic for the Resistance, how to use chaos magic and performance art as forms of political protest. Most of what I'll be discussing today will be based on the collection of essays by William S. Burroughs called The Revised Boy Scout Manual. Uh, if anyone has any questions or comments, please either hold them till the end or put them in chat. Uh, I will not be able to see them until I'm done with the presentation. Then we could figure out if we're going to stop recording at that point to allow people to interact freely or not, but we'll deal with that at that time. But yes, please feel free, put any questions, any comments, any statements that you have as I'm going through these slides. Um, also, one of William S. Burroughs' writing techniques is a technique known as cut up, which is the idea of taking standard linear text and literally and physically cutting them up and rearranging them. And that technique is something I partially did with this presentation. So as we're going through it, it might seem that the text is out of sequence or out of order. That is an intentional thing. And once we get to the end of the entire presentation, you'll see how all the different text and ideas all fit together, even if they don't go in a straight A to B fashion. So starting with that, we'll go ahead and go to the first slide, which talks about William S. Burroughs. The book, The Revised Boy Scout Manual, is a radical manifesto that blends satire, media theory, and revolutionary tactics to propose a subversive blueprint for dismantling systems of control. Burroughs definitely felt that any form of authoritarianism or just authority in general was potentially the result of a virus, and that it was something that needed to be challenged and confronted at every opportunity and at every possible level. Now, for example, you could use chant, spoken word, or ambient sound to be able to create an atmosphere. You could record loops of protest sounds to build sonic rituals. You could whisper, scream, or sing to disrupt expectations. You could create a collective sigil. You could gather in a public space and charge that sigil through synchronized movement or chanting, and then leave that sigil behind as a graffiti or a type of sculpture. Because one of Burroughs's theories is part of what gives authority of any kind, any control, is the idea that there are going to be certain expectations, certain unspoken and spoken ways that people are supposed to react. And a lot of these are built on the premise of fear. And so he was always looking for ways to try to subvert that fear based interaction between people. Now, the book itself was written in the 1970s. The subtitle is An Electronic Revolution, and it stands as a potent artifact of countercultural resistance. It was written during the time of political upheaval, marked by the Vietnam War, the My Lai massacre, and the rise of domestic radical groups like the Weather Underground. Burroughs' manual offers a surreal yet incisive guide to revolution through media manipulation, psychological warfare, and guerrilla tactics. For example, one thing that as a group you could do as a form of psychic protest or counterinsurgent magic is the idea of psychically cleansing a government building. And you could do that by circling the building with incense, bells, salt, chanting to purify the space of corruption and document and share the ritual as a form of performance. One example would be to be able to wear mirrored masks or sigil covered cloaks as a way of both uh, reducing your visibility, creating a alternative projection of who you are to be in that context, and also it works in today's advanced surveillance system that we all live under. You could move in patterns that confuse facial recognition. You could perform gestures that banish surveillance spirits. Currently, John, I'm sure you're probably aware of this. There is a current trend in Great Britain of young people putting face paint on in particular patterns to be able to prevent facial recognition software from determining who they are. So that would be, and perhaps the next level from just putting on face paint would be to sigilize or magically charge those face painted emblems to block video surveillance. Okay. The title of the book itself, the Revised Boy Scout Manual, was done purposely because the Boy Scouts have always been a symbol of American virtue, discipline, and most of all, conformity. Burroughs sets up a satirical inversion of this through his manual. Is not about tying knots or earning merit badges. It's about dismantling the ideological knots of capitalism, nationalism, and media control. Within the essays themselves, his tone does oscillate between deadpan instruction and surreal prophecy. He does offer detailed advice on how to be able to use tape recorders to create feedback loops, how to manipulate public perception through rumor and repetition, and how to exploit the vulnerabilities of bureaucratic systems. At times, the manual does read like a parody of a military field guide, and at others, it resembles a mystical text on the power of sound and symbol. Now, when combined with other practices within chaos magic and performance art, you can create potent protest rituals. For example, a group can be dressed as agents of entropy, performing a banishing ritual against surveillance capitalism. A sigil charged dance in front of a courthouse invoking justice through embodied spell work. Or a silent procession of masked figures carrying symbols of systemic oppression and culminating in a symbolic exorcism. Just want to stop for a moment and go back a couple of slides real quick. Going back to the idea of psychically cleansing a government building. Those of you who have studied any of the counterculture history of the 60s might remember the attempt to exorcise the Pentagon at one point. Because a group of magicians at the time, along with just counterculture protesters in general, created the mindset that within the center of the Pentagon itself was a version of the Lovecraftian entity known as Yog-Sothoth. And so they were actually attempting to both banish that entity from the Pentagon and also were attempting to levitate the Pentagon. The attempt was obviously a physical failure, but just the sheer fact that they were publicly attempting to do this brought enough awareness and attention in regards to what people were willing to do at that time to be able to draw attention to how disgruntled they were at the military industrial complex at that time. And just because something does not work on a physical level is in no way an indication that it should not be attempted again on bigger or smaller scales. Now, continuing on, Burroughs does propose that insurgents use tape recorders to capture and replay conversations, creating confusion and paranoia. By inserting disruptive images into public spaces, they could erode the trust and authority. This strategy anticipates contemporary concerns about disinformation, deepfakes, and viral media. Burroughs understood that perception is reality and that controlling the narrative is more powerful than controlling the territory. His manual outlines techniques for scrambling reality. Burroughs saw that these tactics not merely as pranks, but as revolutionary acts. By disrupting the flow of information, insurgents could expose the artificiality of consensus and open space for alternative realities. One thing I want to throw in at this point, and we could definitely discuss this more during the Q&A section. As I was doing the research for this and seeing all of the ideas that Burroughs was presenting back in 1969 and 1970 on how to be able to use the media to your own advantage, the more and more I would potentially get upset, because it does feel like the extreme right has actually gotten a hold of this playbook and is using it for their own magical purposes. But again, we could talk about that more during the Q&A section, but I wanted to throw out that just this one page itself already kind of shows the idea of, here were ideas on how you could use the media to disrupt your opponents, and now our opponents are using it against us. In the revised Boy Scout manual, Burroughs does treat media manipulation as a form of ritual magic. Tape recorders become talismans, cut up texts become sigils, and the act of disrupting language is akin to casting a spell, breaking the enchantment of dominant ideology. Burroughs was influenced by Aleister Crowley, Brian Gysin, and Hassan E. Sabah, the legendary leader of the Assassins. If that name does sound familiar, it is because the phrase "nothing is true, everything is permitted" is initially associated with Hassan I. Sabah. And he saw revolutionaries as magicians, one who used symbols and sound to alter consciousness. The manual does serve as both a tactical guide and a grimoire, or a book of spells, for the electronic age. Critics have called the text irresponsible, dangerous, or incoherent. Yet Burroughs was not advocating literal violence so much as dramatizing the logic of control. His references to terrorism are part of a larger critique of state power. By mirroring the language of military and intelligence manuals, Burroughs exposes the violence inherent in those systems of governance. His manual is a mirror held up to empire, a reflection of its own tactics turned inwards. The true revolution is psychic. The goal is not to destroy buildings, but to liberate minds. His manual is a call to awaken, to see through the illusions of media and ideology, to reclaim agency through creative acts. Okay. Now, the idea of chaos magic is built on the idea that belief is a tool, but not necessarily a truth. In protest, this means that you could craft rituals that serve your political goals regardless of tradition. One way to do that is through sigil activism. You create a sigil representing your protest goal, for example, end police violence, and you convert that into an abstract symbol. You would then charge it through collective chanting, dancing, or public ritual. You would then deploy it, again, via graffiti, stickers, banners, or social media. So here you could see how it's manifesting already in 2025 through ideas like memes. Sticker culture is very big. Even graffiti as presented by like Banksy, for example, as a form of protest, which then attempts to get assimilated back into the larger culture, usually at its own detriment. The cut-up techniques were very fundamental for the work of David Bowie and Genesis P. Orridge. His media theory anticipated cyberpunk and digital activism. His fusion of satire, magic, and politics does offer a model of resistance that transcends genre and discipline. It challenges readers to rethink the nature of control, the power of language, and the possibilities of resistance. Whether read as satire, prophecy, or tactical guide, it does invite us to become agents of disruption, to be prepared for nonconformity, but for revolution. Burroughs' manual is less about overthrowing governments than about liberating consciousness. In a world that is increasingly shaped by electronic signals and symbolic warfare, Burroughs' message remains urgent. The revolution will not be televised, but it will be cut up and played back until the spell breaks. Here's a example of an activity that you could consider trying. And also, in today's technology age, there are tons of websites and phone apps that would allow you to do various forms of text, audio, and video cut up, mash up, reconfiguration. So there is no shortage of ways for people to be able to do this and to jam, in a sense, the authoritative signal that, in this case, our current administration is trying to lock down into a homogeneous context. But for example, you could record public officials, police, corporate figures speaking in public, and then replay their words in distorted loops near the same location. The purpose is to create confusion, undermine authority, and expose contradictions. In a protest use, you could set up speakers near government buildings or corporate offices to play manipulated speech fragments that highlight hypocrisy or doublespeak. Another thing with using audio feedback is that you do not necessarily have to have it playing loud enough for people to hear. In a lot of Burroughs' early experiments, when he would be using audio feedback to curse people or companies, he would have the volume just barely loud enough for him to hear, with the idea that even if it's not being heard, the what's being said, the intention of what was being said at the time of the recording is still being psychically projected out and kind of underlying whatever it is that is going on at that particular moment, purposely creating a subconscious discordance between what's going on now and what might have happened in the past. So again, you're trying to psychically create dis-ease, especially in those people who are willing to be comfortably blind to what is going on. Because by making them psychically uncomfortable, it causes them to have to figure out, well, what is it that's going on, with the hope that they will then look at what was said by either the corporation that you're protesting or the government building or the particular political speaker, anything along those lines. Another activity is to spread ambiguous and unsettling rumors in public spaces or online. They say that the mayor's office is bugged, or there's a secret meeting happening tonight. The purpose is to destabilize trust in institutions, provoke inquiry and paranoia. As a protest use, you could use whisper campaigns or anonymous flyers to challenge the official narrative or draw attention to hidden abuses. I've tried playing around with this a few times. Yes, I am aware that I am being recorded, but I will go ahead and say this anyway. I have at times purposely tried to spread the rumor that J.D. Vance was specifically behind the death of the Pope back in April of this year, because of the coincidental time frame of J.D. Vance being one of the last people to see the Pope within 12 hours of his death. Also started trying to do a recent rumor, and this is more that I've jumped on the bandwagon of. Someone else started this rumor, but I decided to continue it along. It's one of the things I like to do on X is tweak the noses of extreme conservatives. But the rumor is that J.D. Vance was potentially behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk, specifically to be able to eventually marry Erica Kirk prior to his presidential run in 2028. So you could see how just creating these rumors and blatantly false stories can still cause people to stop and think a little bit rather than just swallowing the given narratives at no matter who they're coming from. Another thing you could do in the context of protest is what could be called a archetype invocation. You would choose a particular archetype to embody during the protest, whether it's trickster, warrior, healer, rebel. You would dress, speak, and act in alignment with that archetype, and then you could use it to guide your behaviors and how to influence others. Within a lot of the organized protests out here in Columbus, there are always people that are specifically both color coordinated and with signage indicating that they are the equivalent of field medics. They carry water, they carry bandages, they carry various other things to help other protesters in case things get more extreme than anyone wants them to. So the idea of having quote unquote field medics among your group during a street protest is already something that happens quite a bit. Another activity is to just repeat key phrases in public speeches. For example, resist, they're watching, this is not freedom, whether it's in public speeches, graffitis, or in recordings. Because even if the person hearing it dismisses it consciously, if they hear these ideas enough times, even if they're consciously resisting it, the idea is that those thoughts will still sink in subconsciously, helping to create that internal dissidence. So, like I said, it's the idea of implanting ideas or inducing a trance-like awareness. You use repetition and chants. You can use it in posters or sound installations to reinforce dissenting messages. Another activity is to interrupt radio, podcast, or live stream signals with subversive content, either literally or through symbolic mimicry. Another thing that you could do is to actually interrupt or derail your own podcast or live stream, knowing ahead of time. You start presenting yourself as a moderate individual who is just reporting on what is going on, and then allow the circumstances that are going on to derail what you're talking about, as a way of showing the public what is actually going on beyond just the sanitized version that most people would prefer to consume. And the purpose of it is to break the flow of controlled media. You could also use it to create fake news broadcasts or emergency alerts that critique real world events. Okay, chaos magic and performance art can be powerful tools in political protests by disrupting dominant narratives, invoking symbolic resistance, and transforming public space into sites of ritual and critique. Chaos magic does emphasize personal belief, symbolic manipulation, and psychological impact. Symbolically, you could bind harmful entities such as corporations, police departments. You could do this using ritual knots, wax figures, or mock contracts. Again, using the enemy's own tools against them on a symbolic level. You could publicly perform a hex to draw attention and to provoke dialogue. Chaos magicians often adopt temporary belief systems. For example, anarchist deities, revolutionary spirits. These are to energize your actions and to unify the participants. Then there is the idea of psychic disruption. Through ritual gestures, chants, or symbolic dress, protesters can invoke archetypes, trickster, warrior, healer, to destabilize authority and reframe the protest as sacred drama. A real world example of this is the trend to use the costumes and dress from The Handmaid's Tale to bring about awareness of how the current laws and the current administration are limiting and restricting women's rights. Chaos magic's adaptability makes it ideal for spontaneous, decentralized protest movements. It empowers individuals to craft their own rituals and meanings, bypassing hierarchical structures. Performance art uses the body, space, and time to communicate ideas. In political protests, you could use it to transform public space. Artists can stage rituals, tableaus, or symbolic actions in streets, plazas, or government sites to challenge norms and provoke reflection. Okay, and I believe that that is the last of my slides. So I will go ahead and exit out of this. See if I can get back to viewing everyone. There we go. Okay, so for for those who do have questions, comments, who want to talk more about uh, what I discussed, I guess we could do a very quick hand vote as to whether or not you feel comfortable having this portion of the workshop recorded. For obvious reasons, I could more than understand people not being comfortable expressing opinions and views uh, in this day and age. So I'm sure Mel will definitely respect everyone's privacy by stopping the recording if that's the general consensus.
I honestly think it's a good idea just so that we can have freer conversation.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I see a couple other people. Let's go ahead and stop the recording,
Uh,
uh, and then go into questions and answers and conversation.
okay.